The baker's life was simple, yet every morning carried the weight of a quiet struggle. His shop was small, tucked at the corner of a cobblestone street, where the smell of fresh bread drifted through the dawn air. People came and went, buying loaves for their families. Yet behind his warm smile was a man counting every coin to keep the doors open. Flour dust clung to his clothes, and his hands bore the cracks of years of kneading dough, but it was the heaviness in his heart that showed most clearly. Each morning, before the first customers arrived, he set aside a few loaves. These weren't for sale. They were for the hungry souls who waited silently near the alley, hesitant and ashamed. Some were children, their eyes wide with longing. Others were weary men who had lost their jobs, or elderly women who had no family left to care for them. The baker placed the bread into their hands gently, as if he were giving them more than food, something closer to dignity. He never asked for thanks, and he never turned anyone away. But deep inside, a storm of doubt brewed. How long could he keep doing this? His bills piled higher, and the fear of closing his bakery gnawed at him. Friends whispered that he was too soft-hearted, that generosity would ruin him. They told him he had to choose between survival and kindness. Yet every time he considered stopping, he remembered the hollow eyes of those who left with bread clutched to their chest, walking a little straighter, as if carrying hope again. One evening, an elderly neighbor stopped by after closing. She had watched him for years, seeing the quiet war he fought between giving and keeping. She sipped her tea slowly and told him that life was like kneading dough. You had to press and fold, give and take. What you put in would always come back, though not always in the way you expected. Her words sank deep into him, though he wasn't sure he believed them yet. Still, he continued. Each loaf he gave felt like giving away a part of himself. Yet, as he watched the hungry walk away with a little light in their eyes, he wondered if perhaps he was receiving something far greater than what he gave. In the silence of his shop, with flowers scattered across the wooden counter, he asked himself if generosity was a burden or a blessing he had yet to understand. As weeks passed, the baker's generosity became the quiet talk of the town. At first, it was spoken with admiration, but soon the whispers grew heavier, laced with doubt. Some customers began to complain. They worried that if he kept giving away bread, he would raise prices to cover the loss. Others argued that he was encouraging laziness, feeding those who should fend for themselves. What began as murmurs turned into sharp glances and disapproving words when he handed bread to the poor. The criticism pierced him more deeply than he expected. He found himself staring at the loaves on his shelves, wondering if each one given away was a mistake. At night, he sat alone in his kitchen, the ticking clock echoing louder than usual, his mind crowded with fear. Was he being foolish? Was he sacrificing his own future for strangers who might never give back? The warmth of his kindness seemed to cool under the chill of doubt. There were days when his hands trembled as he reached for the bread, torn between holding on and letting go. The faces of the hungry haunted him, children pressing their noses against the window. A frail old man too proud to ask, but too weak to hide his hunger. Their silent plea was louder than the town's criticism, and yet the burden grew heavier with each passing week. One evening, as he locked the bakery door, the elderly neighbor appeared again. She walked slowly, her cane tapping softly against the stones. She could see the storm behind his tired eyes. She reminded him of what she once said, that life returns what we give, but only if we have patience to wait. She told him that generosity was not a transaction, but a seed. Seeds take time, she whispered, and only those who wait in faith see the harvest. Her words lingered, but they did not erase his fear. Still, the next morning, when the children arrived, he placed bread in their hands. His chest ached with uncertainty, but his heart would not let him close the door. He felt as though he was walking on a thin rope stretched between despair and hope, never knowing when it might snap. The town continued to watch, divided in their judgment. To some, he was a fool, destined for failure. To others, he was a quiet reminder of kindness in a world too often consumed with self. And in the center of it all stood the baker, caught between doubt and faith, uncertain if his generosity would destroy him or save him. The turning point came quietly, almost unnoticed at first. One morning, a man who had once stood silently in the alley returned, not empty-handed, but with a small basket of apples. He placed them on the counter and said softly that it was all he could offer. The baker accepted them with gratitude, and though it was only a handful of fruit, it carried the weight of something far greater. It was the first sign that his generosity was beginning to circle back. Word spread, not of his foolishness, but of his steadfast kindness. The very people who once whispered doubts began to see how his actions touched lives. A mother who once received free bread began buying what little she could each week, determined to support the man who never let her children go hungry. Others followed, some bringing vegetables, others spreading word of his bakery, until customers returned with loyalty stronger than before. Slowly, coins began to fill the till again, not from business as usual, but from a community that had found its heart. The baker still felt fear at times, but now it was met with something stronger. Each gift, no matter how small, reminded him that generosity had never been a loss. It was an exchange, invisible at first, but powerful in the end. The warmth of his shop no longer came only from the ovens, but from the quiet hum of gratitude that lingered in the air. One evening, as he swept the bakery floor, the elderly neighbor visited once more. She smiled as she looked around, seeing the shelves not just filled with bread, but with trust, with the invisible bonds between people who had chosen kindness over suspicion. She told him that his loaves had been more than food, they had been seeds planted in human hearts. And now, he was living in the harvest. The baker stood in silence, a lump in his throat. For years he had feared that giving would take everything from him. But now, he saw the truth. The more he gave, the richer he had become, not only in business, but in spirit, in connection, in love. And so, the little bakery on the corner became more than a shop. It became a place where the hungry found bread, the lonely found warmth, and the town found its reflection. Generosity, once doubted, had revealed itself as the truest wealth of all. In the end, the baker's story reminds us that generosity is not about what we lose, but about what we create. Each act of giving is like a small flame. It may leave us with less in our hands, yet it lights the darkness for someone else, and in time, it warms us too. True richness is never measured in coins, but in the lives we touch and the love we gather along the way. If this story touched you, share it with others, leave a thought in the comments, and join us by subscribing for more stories of the true spirit of life.